Welcome to Rev Reads. I am Shawn Wilson, once again here with Dr. Steve Lemke, and we have another co-book review for you. Right now, we are reviewing the book Religion and the Technological Future, an introduction to biohacking, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism by Calvin Mercer and Tracy Trothen. Now, what do I know about artificial intelligence, biohacking, and transhumanism? I didn't know anything before I read this book, but now I feel like I know a decent little bit amount compared to probably most people on this topic. So, my first question for you, Dr. Lemke, Steve, since you picked the book, why did you think we should read Religion and the Technological Future?
I was interested in the title, and I've had a background. I've been a hospital chaplain as well as a pastor. I've been on hospital medical ethics committees and dealt with difficult issues, and a lot of these get into medical technology. So, and then as an ethicist, I've gotten into cloning and some of those issues about that are out there in science. So it's out there a little bit, and yet I think that as we see just the acceleration of technology in our lives, that there's no question that uh, it's going to make a bigger difference in medical care in the future, and thus
I
in pastoral care.
Yeah, no, I agree. Reading this book, there were some things that it pointed out that are going to be impacted in religion, church, spiritual spheres that I did not see coming. That I thought they did a good job pulling out and saying this might impact this way and that you might not think. And so I thought that was all good for that as far as bringing that out. So I could see after reading it why this was such an important book to read beyond just, clickbait. And this is what a lot of people are talking about with AI, but this is something that can really touch a lot of areas of spirituality. Steve, could you give us a little overview of what this book is about beyond the title?
Well, the authors are surveying this whole field of technology, and in particular, when it uses the word transhumanism, it's the idea that we increasingly are using technology in medicine, and so it outlines two paths. The first is the precautionary, what they call the precautionary, which I would call moderate enhancement. It's doing just scientific medical advancements that help better human health. And I think that's fairly non-controversial.
So
So that
the pacemaker is an example of the type
right,
of stuff that like
knee
somebody
knee
wondering like those type of
transplant,
things.
you know,
Glasses would probably be the earliest version of those type of
right,
things.
right. Um, which it uses the word cyborg, and I've never considered myself a cyborg, but I realized, okay, I've got an artificial knee,
Yeah.
I've got some pins here and there. I've had back surgery, and I'm using glasses, and I have all kinds of things that are mechanical. Uh,
Yeah.
so I guess I'm a cyborg. Uh, so that's precautionary or moderate enhancement. Proactionary or radical enhancement is really going into a different league. It's popping the clutch, and as they would say in Star Wars, hitting hyperspace. So you're really going and doing things like uploading your brain to a computer and having a kind of artificial body, and so you live forever through this creature that is created. And uh, that I think is very controversial and frankly very troubling. So that's kind of the range of things. So they lay out this range from moderate to radical enhancement, and all along they're saying, okay, here's how this might impact religion and how religion might respond to this. And they're dealing not just with Christianity, but basically all the world religions, but they particularly deal with Christianity. and they think it probably impacts Christianity the most.
Yeah, so it's really a more of a simple book than I expected it to be, because they're just tracking from, basic common medical enhancements that we're all familiar with, and then taking it to ones that could be coming down the pipeline. Maybe they'll never get there, but they're all in the realm of possibility. And they're saying, how is the church, or how should the church respond to these various forms of technology? And one thing that you pointed out in our pre-discussion on this was just how well written this book was. It's a book where no matter what they're talking about, it never feels like it's, going over your head. When I saw a book with with both biohacking and transhumanism in the title, I was like, man, this is going to be way over my head. Like, is Steve's going to have to give all the information on this review, since with his background in ethics and so forth, and I'm just going to sit there like a dummy who didn't really get any of it. But I didn't feel that way at all throughout it. I always understood where they were going, what they were talking about. So I should applaud them on that. They were in deep waters, but made it very relatable for all levels of readers.
I agree. And by the way, I didn't know most of these words either. You know, today, when you use the word transhumanism, some people might think that means associated with transsexual, and it's not at all. It's transhuman in that you're transitioning into kind of a cyborg.
Yeah,
Uh,
something beyond human today. So, I mean, one of the examples that they gave is one advancement they think that they're coming toward with nanotechnology is the idea that if you have liver cancer, they can use nanotechnology to go in and grow a whole new liver inside your body. And so, any type of organ or bone that you would have in your body that would be breaking down due to age, they could just go in and inject the right technology and basically give you all young new organs. And so the question is, are you still human if you've had your body replaced by all of this nanotechnology? So that's sort of what the idea of transhumanism is.
But I just wanted to say, in the text, they define any layperson can read this. And
Yes,
I
yeah.
didn't think that going in. I was intimidated by the book too. But they explain terms very carefully as they go along. And then there's a glossary in the back that also defines the terms. So you really can follow it fairly easily. And their overall purpose is it's they're not saying that religion should do this or that, but they are saying that religion needs to speak into this. That worry that if the scientists left to themselves take off, and it could go in some really dangerous directions. And so they really believe that it needs to hear a religious and ethical perspective to keep it in bounds, as often is the case with new science.
Yeah, and so yeah, and really they're just calling for Christian involvement, which was are not Christian, but whatever religious background that they are. So, what did you think about the author's insights on how they believe Christianity would respond to these changes in technology?
I thought they got a lot of it, and when they described Christianity, they were aware that there are different levels
Yeah.
and parts of Christianity. So they would speak to liberal Christians might do this, more conservative Christians might do that. And so I thought they largely had good insights. Occasionally, I would have disagreed, and I certainly disagreed. That at the end they described Jesus and the resurrection was he was kind of the ultimate transhuman and so forth, and I really I could not go with that. But uh uh there I think thought overall they recognize the kind of worries that different groups would have.
Yeah, I think they did good for the most part representing Christianity. I think the only thing that kind of bugged me was the one point where they talked about Christianity being an oppressive religion and possibly using this for our oppression that we have on others. And I heartily disagree with that viewpoint of Christianity. But for the most part, when they're in the individual responses of how Christianity would respond to this or that, they were probably pretty close on for the most part, even if they had a few, I would say, unwise or generalizations of Christianity in
Sure.
the past. One of the big parts of the book is this idea that people could live for 200 years to 500 years, and about how once people were living hundreds of years, it would create a radical change in spirituality, faith, religion. Because if you think about one of the main I guess you could say bonus points of Christianity is we get to have eternal life with Jesus Christ. We get to live with him forever. So part of the thing they're writing in this book was, what's the benefit of eternal life with Christ if we're going to be living for 300, 400, 500 years on earth, or uploading our mind online to live forever? Before we get to the mind enhancement thing, do you think it's possible for people to live 200 or 300 years like they were predicting in this book?
I think it's possible. If there's an old paradox in philosophy about Theseus's ship, and they take out one plank and replace it, and another plank and another plank, and the question is it still the same ship, even though every plank has been replaced? Um, but I think that you could literally start replacing parts, as you were talking about. I've been involved in a liver transplant selection committee, and and the only people that got the livers were the ones who were going to live. I mean, and there were some other factors, but they had to have them to live, or they wouldn't have been on this list. So if you could do that with a liver and a heart and a kidney and other body parts and organs as needed, you could certainly push it out there at least 100 years. And then the other thing they're kind of counting on is that there are going to be other medical developments, that we might
Yeah, that we can't
discover,
predict. Yeah.
that we can't predict, but we're assuming that there's going to be something that's going to make it even better. So putting those together, yeah, maybe 200 or 300 years. 500 years seems a little long, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm pretty pessimistic at the 200 years. Like I think it's real unlikely, but I mean they do make a good case for it in this book. They're trying to make a good case for 500 years as a possibility. But that was something I was really skeptical. The other thing they talk about is digitally uploading your mind onto an interface so that you can still live with your mind uploaded online. Do you think that that's a possibility for something that could happen in the future?
I think you might could do it, but I don't think that that other being over there is you. I don't think that means you continue living. Um, it's it's like a clone. A clone might be genetically identical, but it's not numerically identical. There's this person, and then there's the clone.
Yeah.
Those are two different people, and uh, so I don't. I don't think that. I mean, that to me, that whole thing is kind of a useless exercise. I mean, I mean, it's not going to be me. It's somebody else that's going to keep living in some kind of cyborg reality. But I don't think of that in any way as everlasting life. Now, I would come back and say, if they have all these moderate enhancements, and we start living 100 years and 150 years, then maybe that takes a little bit of the edge off of our message that I mean, the
Yeah.
great fear is death. That's what
Yep.
everybody fears. It's the survival instinct,
Yep.
and so if death becomes a little less present, a little less pressing, maybe that does move us away some from uh, feeling the comfort of the assurance of eternal life being as important in our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. No, no, I agree with that concern. And he did kind of say that, Christianity, I felt like he was saying, would be the most one of the most difficult faiths to, move forward in the idea of living 300, 400, 500 years, or if you could digitally download your mind. And one of the things I thought kind of fascinating about it, which might even illustrate even more the disconnect between Mormonism and traditional Christianity, is how much Mormonism embraces this. And Mormonism thinks it's such a wonderful thing, and they wouldn't have an issue with it at all, while your traditional Christian faith would have, in their opinion, real difficulty with things like mind uploading. And I did kind of find it fascinating in the book when they were talking about the ethical questions of mind uploading, that if you uploaded in some way your personality and thinking patterns, so a digital version of you existed online, would that digital you have any rights? Like if you died, could you pass your wealth on to a digital version of you, and it would a company in some way own a version of you because you were uploaded onto their software and their hardware? I thought those questions were kind of intriguing. Like, yeah, is this a real person?
Yeah.
But I
Let me
did
go
I did
back
agree
to
with
the
what you said, that wouldn't be
Mormonism
you.
part. Um, one of the key teachings of Mormonism is, as we are, God was, and as God is, we shall become. So it already has built in this enhancement
Yeah,
kind of thing, and even going to other planets and so forth. So uh, yeah, there is as the book mentioned, there's a Mormon transhumanist society that's
yeah.
actively advocating this. Of course, there's a Christian uh, transhumanist society too, though many of us might disagree with some of its beliefs. But so yeah, that's true. And then you mentioned some of the sort of prudential issues. Um, I mean, I've just recently retired, so I'm fixed income, and we're trying to still have money, but uh, when we go out of this. And if I had to plan, you're younger than me, so how much money do you need to retire? Well, if you were going to live for 150 years, you need probably two or three times as much money as you currently uh, might anticipate. So uh, that's just one part of it. Now they say there's a savings involved because you don't have as much medical uh, uh,
Oh yeah, because your body would be just
intervention and
wonderful
don't
all
have
the
to go to
time.
the emergency room as
Yeah.
much. But I don't think that by any means would cancel out the cost of that person. I mean, just think about Social Security,
Oh yeah.
where it's
Social Security
already
when you die. Yeah.
Social Security is already in trouble. But if people were to live 150 years and draw that long, I mean, you would have people drawing. Now maybe you would work longer,
Yeah.
but there would be many, many, many more people drawing Social Security than contributing to it.
Although one point they do try to make is that as soon as you start talking about living to 150 or 200, you're going to have to be in the prime of life up through 100, 125 years instead of, through 50 years or 60
Yeah.
years, So they stretch that out as well. So they talk about numerous ethical concerns throughout this book. And one thing I thought interesting is their easily biggest ethical concern, because it comes up at the end of pretty much every single chapter again and again, was about how social disparity might happen as a result of human advancements. So what do you think about their concern that an increase in biohacking would result in an increase in disparity between the wealthy and the poor?
Well, they do. In the end of each chapter, they deal with a cluster of issues, and justice issues is one of them. And their concern is that, at least initially, only wealthy people could afford this
Yeah.
extremely expensive surgeries, and therefore it appears inequitable, and and they have a lot of concern about that, and I think that concern is well taken. It's just not new. Uh, Again, I mentioned being on organ transplant selection committees. One of the first questions they ask, particularly with somewhat innovative surgeries that aren't yet insurance, is can they pay? Because Medicare is not going to pay for it. Most regular health care providers, insurance is not going to pay for it. So you have to be independently wealthy to do it. The the particular surgery at that point on liver transplant had the wound that was left looked a little bit like a famous hood ornament on a luxury car. and and the joke was that the doctor got the hood got the BMW, and the patient got the hood ornament. But I once asked my supervisor as a chaplain, why is that fair? And he said, well, it's not equitable, but if we didn't if people didn't pay for it, we just simply couldn't do it at all
Yeah,
for
yeah,
anybody. So it just comes down to there's just we have limited resources and we can only do what we can do. Now they were talking about kind of making this a new form of Social Security that
yeah.
you would be
No, no, yeah,
guaranteed
yeah.
that everybody could have it, and yeah, that would be a brave new world.
No, there are justice concerns about the disparity in this technology. That just drove me crazy the most. I think this thing that bothered me the most in the whole book. Well, we'll get to their take on dispensationalism in a moment, which is running neck and neck with that. But my opinion, when it comes to the rich affording these medical breakthroughs, we need to be encouraging the wealthy and pushing them forward. Do these medical breakthroughs, pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for these slight improvements in
Be
your
our
life.
guinea pigs.
Yeah, because that's what happens. You're our guinea pig. The more wealthy people that do it, it drives down the cost, makes it more accessible to more people. But if the wealthy can't pay outrageous sums to develop this medicine and this technology, we never see it at all. And
That's
so I
exactly
think,
right. And I can remember when computers first came, and that
oh,
cost a
yeah,
lot of money, and many people could not afford them. But as more and more people got them, the price came down and it became,
yes.
something almost everybody has.
Yeah, no, and I see it the same way with this. So I think on the justice end, I think they should have it almost in the opposite that they did, and encourage wealthy people to take risks, to spend the money in the name of the more the wealthy people do it, the more it'll be available to more people. So I almost went the exact opposite that they did. And because my opinion is if our standard's going to be we can only do this once we can have the government do it and give it to everybody equally, well, it's never going to happen. So yeah, I want to give it to the wealthy. I want them to be doing it as quick as they can, and hopefully it'll pass on to more people. The part of the book, though, that surprised me the most, Steve, that I did not expect to see in the book was that there would be moral enhancements. So, as in your morality, the way that you live, and not just physical enhancements. So, what did you think about the idea of morality enhancements? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's desirable?
I didn't like it at all. Uh, and let me draw this distinction. If if I am doing something because, say, we've done a genetic therapy and we've changed, or even a brain
Yeah,
surgery, and we've changed my inclinations not to do this or not to do that, um, then I have not made a moral choice. When you say moral, improve morally,
yeah,
if it's to be improved morally, I have to choose to do something right and refrain from doing something wrong. But if I did it because of those reasons, it's because I've been programmed like a
yeah,
machine.
yeah,
And so it is, what that does is change behavior, but it does not change morality. In the 70s, there were some behavioral psychology clinics for things like alcoholism and overeating, and like they would have a bar that you could go and have all the drinks you wanted, and it had the atmosphere, it had the honky tonk music playing and everything. But when you drank them, they spiked it so that you vomited for the next few hours, and and so you got negative images in your mind whenever
Yeah.
you thought about alcohol next time, or the same thing with food. And so, okay, that might help change people's behavior because they've kind of been
Yeah.
tortured out of it. They've faced very negative consequences for doing this thing. So they might change, but it's not because they said, I really need to stop drinking. It's because they have been programmed to have negative associations when they think about alcohol. So that changed their behavior. It did not make them more moral.
Yeah, and I appreciated that section because I thought, one, it's something we need to grapple with because I do think it's going to come, and I think it's going to be so tempting to be like, oh, you struggle with drunkenness. We got something that we can take that'll take that away, or if we have a man who's an abuser of children, maybe we can take this behavior away and change people morally. And I think it's going to be really tempting to do. But I think one thing,
Particularly even with children, with
oh yeah,
doing
we'll
trying
start it with it.
to be
Yeah.
before the child even
Yeah.
born, to try to enhance intelligence, enhance
We'll
physicality,
start in
that
the
kind of
womb.
thing.
Yeah. But what I think also what you would see and I think you had to kind of really look into the weeds, and I don't know if they are really pointing this out as well as they should have, but I think all the trade-offs for making these changes medically are not going to be worth it. Like you talked about your example, you'll basically lose freedom because you'll no longer be able to make these decisions for right or wrong. You'll just do basically what you've been genetically programmed to
Which to
do.
say is you lose your humanity.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, I mean, we
um,
could have asked the same thing of God.
yeah.
God make us where
Oh,
we
yeah, yeah.
can't do anything wrong, and yet God, in His sovereignty, chose to allow us enough a limited freedom of choice that we could choose some things.
Yeah.
And one reason for that is if you can't choose something, you can't choose to love someone
Yeah.
or obey someone. You're just doing it as a machine. I mean, a robot can do what you tell it, but it's not because it's obedient. It's not because it loves you. It's because it's programmed to do it.
Yeah, no, so yeah, great point. So I yeah, no, I thought I found that to be one of the better sections of the book on the moral enhancements because I think it's so important. I think it might be the most tempting to for religions, for churches to hold on to and to bring in because we want people to make these changes, but I think the trade-offs are all going to be uh, worse than what we would want because we
Yeah.
need men to have testosterone and aggression. Like we need that. We don't want to remove that from people because the negative side effects are going to be even worse. And so they kind of point to that not as heavily as I think they should have, but they do show that some of those trade offs aren't going to be what we would want in the end.
Yeah.
All right. So, last subject on religion and the technological future, and that is throughout the book, they have lines here and there, little things dotted throughout about right wing Christians and about conservative Christianity and about them being sort of the branch of Christianity that isn't going to respond at all well to any of these technologies. They're basically going to boo hoo everything that's even going to be for a positive, that they're not going to be good. And then at the end of the book, they tell you who the conservative Christians are that are the right wing, and that is dispensational premillennialists. So, Steve, what do you think about the idea that dispensational premillennialists reject optimism, hope, and that they're anti intellectual?
Well, particularly that last claim, I thought was uh, ill-founded, and what they do is quote things in popular culture, like the Left Behind series, but they don't in every other view in the book. They go to the scholars who
Yeah,
represent that view, and
I agree.
here they went to popular culture. I mean, if they had read the scholars of dispensationalism, they would see, for example, they talk about all these apocalyptic visions. They didn't make up these apocalyptic visions. They're in the book of Revelation.
I know.
and and they are simply trying to be faithful to what the text says. And they never mention that. They never mention that all the apocalyptic things come from the book of Revelation and other sections of scripture that get to that. So I thought that that was the one. On the one hand, I was a little surprised that
Oh
they
yeah.
knew dispensationalism. I took it that that was not their view, and so they at least were aware of it. But I thought they did a bit of a negative caricature of it. Uh, it is true that dispensationalism is saying things are going to get worse and worse until Christ returns,
Yeah.
and then it's going to get better. We're not, post millennialism says everything's going to get better and better, and they don't agree with that. But I don't believe, in fact, I would disagree with them that premillennialists would be opposed to things like knee surgery
Yeah, I know.
liver transplant and this kind of thing. I'm quite sure they would be favoring moderate enhancement, and so yeah, I think they were not fair in that one case for reasons I'm not clear.
Yeah, no, it was shocking to me where all of a sudden, right toward the end, they get to the right wing reaction and they finally tell you who the right wingers are. And they say that it is the Darby Schofield Lindsay left behind techno apocalyptic tradition. That we are the ones who are going to reject all this and be
That's which,
anti-intellectual.
by the way, one of the things that it's not very good is if people that you call that would not own that label, and
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
no
think
way.
any dispensationalist would own that they're techno uh, apocalypse people.
Oh yeah, no, the authors of Left Behind series wouldn't own that. And so no, but you're right. That was the frustrating thing was that throughout the book, they are clearly dealing with the scholars the whole time in everything, in other religions, in other parts of Christianity, and then all of a sudden they're like the Left Behind series. And I'm just like, oh no. And so yeah, I was that was a frustrating point about to me about it is that because they sort of little drop these things that are negative about conservative Christianity, right wing throughout the book, and then all of a sudden it gets to the end and they're like, this is who they are, and it's premillennial dispensationalists, and I'm just like, man, we got some work to do. I don't know if it was just because the Left Behind series was so popular that that's all people think about now and all they realize. And that if it wasn't for that series, maybe they wouldn't know about dispensationalism at all. But it is a little frustrating as someone who would read I would say the intellectual side of dispensationalism, that is how we're caricatured as that
Yeah,
we're the
yeah,
anti-intellectuals who would reject technology.
right, right. I agree.
Uh, Overall, what would you say your overall opinion on the book?
I was glad I read it. It filled in a lot of things that I didn't know previously, and and made me think differently about some things. That the moderate enhancement, I didn't realize maybe just how much that's already
Yeah,
impacted my own life, and that I really have no problem with it. So uh, I'm I'm all for moderate enhancement. I think that the radical enhancement runs the risk of losing our creatureliness, uh, and I'm talking about our finitude, our creaturely finitude, and and uh, and begins playing the role of God.
yeah,
And they deal with that issue. They deal also with the Tower of Babel, and I think that's I, I think if we were to go in the direction of radical enhancement, I wouldn't be surprised if God created a 21st century Tower of Babel. That
or that's the point where God just says, "Jesus, you're going back."
Yeah,
Like,
right, right. Well, even so, come Lord Jesus.
yeah, yeah. No, no, I agree. I thought one of the things that's nice about a book on ethics like this is that you don't really need to agree with the authors for it to be a good book. It just needs to raise the right questions, have the right discussions, get your mind going in the direction that you should be. And I would say, would you agree? It did all of that.
It did all of that, and I think they tried really hard to be fair.
Yeah, I would agree. I
There
agree. Yeah.
and to be sort of neutral, because they would say these are the advantages of it, these are
Yeah.
the disadvantages, and they
Yeah.
tried to be as balanced as they
Yeah.
could. They may have tipped their hand at points that
Yeah.
maybe they were leaning this way or that, but their larger issue, and I think this is why it's important, I would say to the pastors and other Christian leaders, this is a book you need to read,
Yeah.
both to be aware of the issues first, but secondly, what it's asking for is believers, people of faith, people with ethical backgrounds to speak into this,
Yes.
and to maybe put some limits on what otherwise could go way out of control.
No, no, you're right. This is a book that should be read much wider than it is being read, has been read in the church. It should be read by professors who are teaching pastoral theory. It should be read by pastors who are meeting with their congregants, because this is going to touch more and more areas in our lives, from regular trips to the hospital to getting counseling on certain issues. The chapter on superintelligence with artificial intelligence, I mean, we're going to come to a point where one of your options for a counselor when you're having a problem is going to be, or do you want to go to the AI? And I think a lot of people are going to say, I want Google to give me the answer for my problem that I'm having in my marriage. I
Right.
think I'm gonna end up saying that, even if it sounds crazy. I think that's the direction that we're going.
Well, and
You can be
being
like,
in education, the chat GTX thing
yeah,
is, and
yeah,
the use of AI in student papers, there's not an institution in the country that's not
yeah,
scrambling right now to write a policy about when can you and can you not
yeah.
use AI. But I would also say that as Christian leaders, our our college students are going to be coming back, maybe even high school students. So our collegiate ministers, our youth ministers, our pastors need to be aware of this issue, and kind of have some frameworks for it, because you're going to be asked this question.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, no, this is the stuff people are going to be talking about. And so, while a lot of the review that Steve and I had, were talking about this book, had a lot of negative things about the thoughts of the authors, I think it was all good stuff that it leads us into having these discussions that we need to have on these issues, and it should be something that is discussed more often. And so, I want to thank Mercer and Trothen for writing this book, bringing this information out. It's a book that should probably be updated every 3 to 5 years,
Really.
with changes and stuff. So I would like to think that maybe if this review is seen by an editor or somebody, they'd be like, "Oh, we need to get started on a new edition of it," because I think the technology's changing that much. But I was so thank you, Dr. Lemke, for recommending this book. I appreciate it.
I enjoyed reading it and interacting with you on it.
Even if it felt like a school assignment at some times, I'm glad that I read it still. I felt like it radically went back and forth to, this is the most fascinating thing that I've read, to it feels like I'm back in school, and I'm going to have to hand in a paper to Dr. Steve Lemke at the end of this. So thank you for your thoughts, and thank you for those who have watched our review on religion and the technological future. I want to encourage you that if you have not yet subscribed to Rev Reads, that you subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on the most current book reviews. And also, if you are already a part of the Rev Reads family, share this interview with other people. I'm not really sure how much this is going to get watched based on the topic of this book, but based on what we're saying, a lot of people need to be having these conversations. So help spread this online and allow more people to talk about this book. So thank you so much, Steve, for your time in this review.
Glad to be here.